Hey guys, welcome back for another wheel spin build. So today we have a super wheel spin. How this will work, we'll go from left to right, and what we'll do is today we'll build the first vehicle, and then the next vehicle is the next video, and then the following vehicle is the next video. This way we can pace ourselves and efficiently get multiple build and tunes out. Again, I'm hoping that by watching me build and I try to explain my thought process, I'll treat you something new and hopefully make the process of building and tuning easier for you to understand why you upgrade certain ways and tune certain ways, without us just sitting here copying the same build over and over. If I ever get any repeat cars, by the way, we'll either do a different build on a car, so like in the last video we built this 2018 Ford Mustang GT for A-Class cross country. If we get this again today, we'll do a A-Class road tune or drift tune, or B, we'll look at the value of the car. So this Mustang has a value of 40,000 credits. We'll take that and buy a car for 40,000 credits, just to keep things diverse and fun. Also lastly, I know I said left to right, but if there's a fun build or I get an idea, we'll do that. But for the most part I'm gonna go from left to right. So anyways, let's jump into the wheel spin, and while this goes, be sure to subscribe with post notifications on so you can keep up with this series and the coming Forza Horizon 6 content, including builds and tunes for every car in the game. Okay, so, yeah, this'll be fun. So we're going to do the Dodge Viper first. So as for the build, I'm thinking all-wheel drive tandem build, not like strictly meta or points, just a fun all-wheel build. We could do rear wheel, but I'm biased because this car is super fun with all-wheel drive and you don't need the pure meta to be somewhat competitive with points drifting. We'll angle it towards points but mostly tandem and fun. So, firstly all-wheel drive, because that's the type of build we're going for. If anyone wants to see a rear-wheel drive drift build for this car, be sure to comment and let me know you want a rear-wheel tandem or points build. But anyways, we're gonna throw on the single turbo for the high power, because why not? We have all-wheel drive and we're good drifters that can handle the crazy power. If you can't handle the crazy power, there's nothing wrong with having a lower power build. Next we're gonna do snow tires, because they're just kinda the best for tandem drifting. Not very fast, very consistent grip level between different cars, lots of slide and fun. Now there's a couple ways of going about tire width. On all-wheel drive builds most of the time you would leave it stock, but we're making so much power and torque that spinning them specially on snow tires will not be an issue, and I want it to be really snappy and responsive, so we're gonna do an unstaggered setup. So we're going to do 305 front and back. There's some advantages to staggered versus non-staggered. With a non-staggered setup you don't have natural oversteer and you have a lot more grip. But with a staggered setup you have a decent amount of grip, especially on the back, because you typically would have a larger back tire unless you're drag racing a front-wheel drive car, lol. But I like to have the same tire width front and back for fun tandem builds. Keeps things consistent and I can tune it out. If I really need all the slide and speed, I would do a staggered setup with as skinny front tires as possible, because this gives you natural oversteer and the ability to make the front end wash out or push out, which lets you control the speed a little bit better than staggered setups. Typically you can get more angle and go the same speed with an unstaggered setup, but anyways. So a little tip, this is for drifting and racing, specifically about tires, but this sometimes applies for suspension. So let's head over here. You see stock, race, and rally springs and dampers. Now keep in mind this is a Formula Drift car. That means the stock suspension is already on drift suspension. If you don't see drift suspension in here, that means one of two things. Either A, you're already on drift suspension stock, in this case we are, or B, that vehicle doesn't get drift suspension. Your next best suspension would be rally suspension if that was the case. This applies to cars as well, because if you come in here and you see rally and drift suspension but no race suspension, that likely means you're already on race suspension stock. And this applies to tires, because if we come in here you see here's stock tire compound, and the next available upgrade is semi-slick race tires. That means stock this car is on sport tire compound. If you come in here and you see street tire as the next upgrade, that would mean it's on vintage or true stock tires. If you come in here and see Horizon semi-slick or just slick tires, that means your car is on a special racing type tire stock. Some cars have special race tires that are really grippy, and you can find some that's like if you switch to the semi-slick it has less grip than stock. But typically it also costs less PI, and you might consider doing that, because then you can have more or similar grip to everyone else but more power or lighter weight. Now on to tire pressure. This is all-wheel drive and this is an unstaggered setup, so we want to get a little natural oversteer. Not much, but we do want it to oversteer because we're drifting. So I typically start around the high 20s, so like I'll go 26, 28. Now for your alignment, there's multiple ways of doing this, so I wanna discuss this a little. Firstly, meta. There is a meta way of doing your alignment, that would be maxed out. This gives you the most slide. The car literally can't drive in a straight line, it's purely drifting. This is very good for points drifting and a good starting point. The idea would be to start completely maxed out like this. And then test it and you slowly lower it until it drifts exactly how you want. With less camber and tow you accelerate faster and get more speed. But the downside is you get less slide. And again, we're not doing a meta points build. We're doing a fun tandem build. I personally call this a street setup, because I'm gonna try to use as little camber and tow as possible, which if we was on simulation damage the tires would last longer, and you can still achieve like 80 to 90% of what a true meta tune can do, but it can be much easier to drive when you're not drifting. So my personal starting point looks like this. Again, this is for all-wheel drive. If you remember in the first episode we drift build that big, you typically want a little bit of front tow and you want your rear to be slightly positive. Now you might be hearing that and going either meta slave or weirdo lull. But the logic is when you're drifting the back of the car squats down. If you have your camber slightly positive in the rear when the car squats down, it'll be closer to zero camber, which gives you the most acceleration and grip as possible. For anti-roll bars I like mine stiff to avoid body roll because I use a soft suspension. Being said, it'll be stiffer than what the stock tune comes with, and I'm pretty sure the real tune of this suspension does not look like this lull. But again, it's all-wheel drive so we want oversteer, so I'm gonna have the front softer than the rear. Now with the springs we have so much oversteer tuned in with the tire pressure alignment and anti-roll bars, we want it to be smooth too, so we're gonna use the springs to give it a good amount of understeer for the suspension. Reason I do this now is that it's more like natural understeer, and this way is better for letting the car be as free as possible while being smooth. Now I don't typically do aero on drift cars. You really don't want aero on drift cars, but there's a few ways of using this to help you as well. Now it's a Formula drift car so there's not much aero, but I think we'll do a high aero tune. So firstly, like I always do, I like to find out the max aero I can run for both because I like them to be even. I don't want it to over or understeer with the aero, I want it to just push the car down evenly and let the suspension handle the balance. So the most we can do is 49, so we're gonna do that. Now if you're finding that at speed everything seems right and you don't want to add any more camber or tow because you don't want to lose speed, you can increase your downforce, and if you have more downforce on the front then the rear it'll try to pull the front end straight during high speed drifting, which can help a little bit. But for the most part I would typically do as low aero as possible because I want the slide over the grip. But this isn't much downforce so it won't hurt that much, and maybe you like grip and want it to pull at speed, so we'll do that. Now this is where all-wheel drive drift builds can feel insanely different. So this isn't official or anything, but I like to think there's three main ways of doing your all-wheel drive drift differential settings. A is your true all-wheel drive. This is as close to 50-50 as possible, and I used to only do this for so many years. I absolutely refused to put power to the back because I wanted it to be true all-wheel drive. B is your meta style, where you're only using all-wheel drive as a safety to not spin out and give you as much points as possible. For the most part the center value is typically between 70 and 100% to the rear. You would start 100% and then slowly bring it down until when you countersteer it pulls hard but it doesn't understeer. And C is my new style. I call this kinda meta kinda street. So the idea of this is to make drifting all-wheel drive easier without losing the benefits of all-wheel drive drifting, which is extreme angle precision. So I typically fall between 62 and 85% to the rear. Now this doesn't work as well as it could in this game because some cars will no matter what have too much power to the front even at 100% rear, and instead of the power truly going to the rear it's more so slowly unlocking, so you're drifting and then the front end just stops mid-drift. It's very weird. So I start around 70% rear. My goal is to have as much power to the rear as possible while still being able to spin the front tires at any moment. I typically judge this off of two ways. Firstly is the launch. full throttle launch, it should spin all 4 wheels, and then I get going at speed, throw it in first gear while doing a 180 and full throttle. If the front end spins trying to pull it forward, still it's right. I'll show you what I mean. Maybe not with this car, I haven't tried it with this car yet, so I don't know if this has the weird differential bugginess where it's unlocking instead of sending power where it should be, but we'll try. Now I also wanna cover your acceleration and deceleration for your differentials. So we'll start at the front. A high locking differential will grip more to an extent and will try to evenly put power to the 2 wheels. You can kinda cheat this, because if you have 10% front acceleration and a fully locked rear differential, even with a 50-50 power split, it will oversteer to an extent. So my goal is to have the highest locking rate possible. For deceleration, this is what happens when you let off throttle. There's a few other things about it, but for the most part a high deceleration will slow down and stay sideways easier than if it was open on deceleration, because you're adding resistance off throttle. Okay, so firstly, I want to find the center differential, so I'm gonna start by a full throttle launch, and then I'm gonna do a 180 and full throttle because I want to see if the front end still pulls forwards while going backwards. As you can see, it does, so now you should go slow, but I'm gonna shove it to 100% rear to see what it does. As you can see here, when I have momentum backwards and I go full throttle, while this car does have the buggy weird thing, it does let loose. That means this is way too rear wheel drive for my style. Now what we should do is try 95% test. If it still does it, try 90, then try 85, then try 80. I know when this happens there's no real way of setting it properly because you're kinda delaying the release of the front end. So I find typically it's between 77 and 84%. Okay, now we want to test the gearing. So firstly, first gear, we want to set our stall speed around 10 miles per hour. Again, all that means is that you have to go below 10 miles per hour for it to stall, and that lets you get the longest first gear possible to avoid excessive wheel spin while not having it stall too much. Unfortunately, this is just kinda a high idle motor, so it's always gonna have a higher stall speed, so 12 miles per hour is okay stall speed. You don't really get too many issues until 15 to 20 miles per hour, because those are speeds that you'll commonly drive at, and if it stalls around there then you'll be constantly stalling and you don't want that. And then again, we're gonna do my gearing, not the gearing from the first episode. I like shifting a lot, but I do want it to be within reason. I aim to make every gear driftable while being as short as possible and having as much top speed as possible, so it'll look something like this. So because on throttle it's understeering way too much, there's two ways of fixing this. One is moving it more rear bias, which is the proper fix, but unfortunately this game sucks and doesn't work properly. The other way is to unlock the front differential. It'll send power to the outside tire more than the inside and hopefully push the car to oversteer instead of pulling the car so hard to understeer. I typically would stay within the range of 15 and 95% for the front acceleration, 0 and 15% for front deceleration, between 50 and 100% rear acceleration and 25 to 100% rear deceleration. Just takes a little bit of testing, and the best way to do this is to try high and low until you find something that works better. So let me show you how I do this. Okay, now we need to fix a couple more small issues. So firstly, it understeers a lot in the mid-corner, which is good for smoothness, but excessive understeer mid-corner will cause it to not rotate. I also noticed that the transitions are a little slow, so when I go from a drift going right into a drift going left it's not snapping as hard as I want. Now there's a few ways of fixing that too. So we're going to soften the front spring rate a little bit because it's smooth but it's a little too understeery and resistant to the transitions I want. We're going to increase the rear camber a little to help rotate mid-corner as well, and we're going to soften the front anti-roll bar a little bit to make the transitions a little more snappy. A little better. I do want a little more snap to the transitions, and I want it to be a little more free during the mid-corner, so we're going to decrease the front tire pressure. This gives us more turn-in overall, and I feel it's a little too resistant to pulling back, so we're going to increase the front toe as well as the front deceleration in the differential. And now to make this a proper tandem tune, because it's all-wheel drive, technically put your front brake 100% to the front, which again in Forza these are reversed, so it's 0% to the rear, which makes it 100% to the front lull. But anyways, we're also going to slightly increase the front spring stiffness just a little because we're adding a lot of mid-corner oversteer and we don't want it to do too much. There we go, now this thing handles beautifully. So to showcase this build we're going to head up to the mountain and do a downhill run to show you can still get some serious points. But this is mostly a tandem tune. Unfortunately I don't have anyone to tandem with at the moment, and finding another all-wheel drive drifter is harder than you think, lol. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone has a wonderful day/night. I'll see you guys in the next video. Be sure to subscribe with post notifications so you don't miss any future videos of this series and Forza Horizon 6 content. See you guys soon.